tonight's going to be speaking about what happened in Lahaina. I just went there 2 years ago, and it's disturbing what happened there. I still can't believe it's unfathomable. So he'll discuss that and how that could be he's going to probably show his evidence why it's going to be a smart city. So let's go ahead and give him a round of applause, and he can go get started on his presentation. Okay, here you go, David. Dr. David.
Did you connect? Yeah.
Could I ask you to
We can move over.
one way or the other?
Yeah.
We'll see here.
Then I can zoom in.
Working?
And I'll do the same.
Looks like it.
You go that way and you go your way.
Without any warnings and without any water, the people tried to flee, but they were
Now,
stopped.
do you want the big TV connected to this?
Without water.
Huh?
Do you want the big TV connected to this?
Yes.
Okay, do you have HDMI?
HDMI, yeah.
Yeah, okay, perfect. I'll connect you right now.
No way. And so I just kept walking. Maybe you know something I don't. The Maui chief of police was the incident officer in one of the biggest cover-up operations in U.S. history. Orders to keep people without any warnings.
Oh my gosh, my old friends, hi.
We can start
Long
now.
time no see, hi.
Yeah.
So happy to see you now. I'm glad she calls for you. Hi. Happy to see you. I miss you guys. Happy
I have a long HDMI cord if you need one.
I got a 50-footer here.
Oh, okay.
It should reach 20 feet.
Yeah, okay.
There's a microwave too over there. I picked them up at like 3 o'clock.
Well, thank you all for coming. I have a few syllabi over there. Dr. Herman Hoyt from Gray said, yeah, you're the guy on his horse and rode off in all directions. So I cover a lot of different subjects. I taught cults and world religions for 20 years at Purdue. And then I debated atheists for 2 years in this area, once a month. And it was a formal debate. It was kind of fun. Here, I can do it.
Right here.
Yep.
Right in there.
So tonight
He's going to turn the mic on a little bit for you.
Tonight we're going to be, okay, first thing I want to do is show a little video here that's 2 hours and 38 minutes long. We're only going to watch the first 2 hours and 15 minutes of it. No, I'm kidding. So,
without any water, the people tried to flee, but they were stopped by the police, who had orders to keep people from escaping.
I said, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm your order to keep them here. And I said, the fire is right around the same place. It's only at Front Street. We need people to get out of here. And he said, I'm following orders. No way. And so I just kept walking. Maybe you know something I don't.
The Maui chief of police was the incident officer at one of the biggest cover-up operations in U.S. history, the 2017 Las Vegas.
To stop these disasters from getting even worse, we have to cut the carbon pollution that's driving the climate crisis. And that's what the Inflation Reduction Act is all about. As Green Nerd, we're marking the 1-year anniversary of a truly transformative piece of legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest investment in clean energy and climate action ever in the United States and the history of the world. But first, I want to acknowledge that today's event is coming from the time of heartbreak as a result of extreme weather fueled by climate change is being felt across the country and the world. This summer has brought unplanned disaster as another with extreme heat in Arizona and Texas, and across the southeast, the floods in Vermont, upstate New York, the thick smoke from Canadian wildfires. And all of us have watched in horror as the Maui fires have claimed over 100 lives, the largest loss of life fire in the last
used to looking at water as like something which we use and not necessarily something that we revere. But that's totally different in this Western capitalistic economy that we live in. It's very extractive, individualistic approaches. Let water connect us and not divide us. Like we can share it, but it requires true conversation about equity.
Last time I checked, water puts out fires. Progressive mumbo jumbo doesn't.
This is
personally know people that are telling me that construction is way worse. We're being told. I am witnessing the cover-up by the media firsthand.
I am not living here located in Maui. I live in Kihei, and I want to share some local updates. Shocking, or maybe not. Did you hear that the government of Hawaii
there's true conversation about equity.
Well, Vietnam with Hawaiian fires. Now, I want you to look at this footage. Now, the governor did say this is a climate change conference. Interesting. What they don't talk about is in January how they had in Maui a smart city conference to turn Maui into an entire smart island, changing everything to electric, renewables, solar panels, and pushing everybody into electric vehicles. 15-minute smart cities. So now what's also interesting is next month in September, Hawaii is hosting the Digital Government Summit, utilizing AI to govern the island. It's almost like they're resetting something to start rebuilding for this in which they're trying to push. Now, when we look at all the climate change narrative that they're going to try to push, but they're not going to talk about the Weather Modification Act of 1976. I highly recommend everybody look into this act, because who is involved in the weather modification activities? Department of Agriculture, Department of Defense, Department of Interior, EPA, and NASA. So if they're modifying the weather, then could they have caused this event? So we see that the Department of Defense and other fashion.
It's 2 hours and 43 minutes. So you just heard 27 minutes of it, approximately. But I put down that you got the address for it so you can listen to the whole thing. Yes, it is. Yeah, my mic's on. But I thought maybe you'd like to see a little bit of that, and yeah, you can watch it on your own if you have time. Yeah, this is the deadliest fire since 1918, and it's what we go back and look at what actually when this started. It started way back, but 1987 would be a good place to start. That's when we have our common future, and this lady, Gro Harlem Brundtland, was a socialist, and the mandate of their mandate, her Brooklyn Commission's mandate, was sustainable development, and she was vice president of the Socialist International and also a former prime minister of Norway. And according to the authors, sustainability focuses on three things: global land use, global education, global population control, and reduction. Doesn't sound too bad, except in actual practice, these concepts are far below their lofty rhetoric. The true objectives of Agenda 21 revealed include an end to national sovereignty, restructure of the family unit, which means basically the state will take care of your children with a keen eye toward indoctrinating them into the state control over family allegiance, abolition of private property with citizens crammed into stack and pack high-rise apartment buildings close to the railroad tracks where cars will not be allowed. Agenda 21 is a major tool of the New World Order, conceived in 1992 at the Rio de Janeiro at the Earth Summit. Is this, can you hear okay?
Yes.
It sounds like there's too much bass. But at this meeting in 1992, this was 5 years after, so our common future, she asked these people, can you implement this in 5 years? And so 5 years later, that's when the real conference was. That's when they implemented Agenda 21. And of course, it's supposed to be at the start of the 21st century, all of this stuff was supposed to be in place. And President Bush signed for the U.S. Later, President Clinton signed an executive order. They couldn't get it through Congress because what you're doing, essentially, is you're turning over the sovereignty to the United Nations. And they weren't going to get that done, but they could maybe get somebody like a Democratic president to sign over an executive order basically demanding compliance with from every state and community with the goals and plans of Agenda 21, which is fast becoming the official policy in every town, city, and state. Compassionate sound terms like population stabilization, sustainable development are simply masked for the true purpose of the United Nations plan, a world domination of your life and liberty, basically an insidious plot to control any and all parts of existence. Rosa Corey wrote this excellent book. She passed away about a year and a half ago. But Agenda 21 is a blueprint, an action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all energy, all information, all human beings in the world. A totally comprehensive plan, and data collection is a vital part of this plan. We have been in the inventory phase for a very long time. We're now moving into the control phase. We're now in the transition period between representative government and government by unelected boards and commissions, erasure of jurisdictional boundaries, loss of private property rights, loss of sovereignty, and our freedom. We're losing sovereignty not only to our dirt, but to our very person. This should be a concern of not just people in the United States, but free human beings all over the world. Prior to the current World Economic Forum theme, the Great Reset, it was called Agenda 21, meaning everything they wanted to accomplish on the world scene concerning the environment, the economy, equity, along with diversity and inclusion was to be completed by the beginning of the 21st century. They missed the mark. Their new target is 2030. It was Klaus Schwab, the founder of World Economic Forum, who said, in 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy about it. One headline coming out of the World Economic Forum was, does capitalism need some Marxism to survive the fourth industrial revolution? This is another term for the Great Reset. The elite want to take take the responsibility of self-responsibility off of your shoulders. They want to destroy small businesses because they don't fit in with their plans. That's why during COVID-19, over 100,000 small businesses were shut down. The mom and pop stores that were permanently closed while the big companies like Walmart, Costco, Target, and Fortune 500 companies remained open. So Agenda 21 is a conspiracy by the United Nations to deprive individuals of property rights. Columnists in Atlantic have linked opposition to Agenda 21 to the property rights movement in the United States, which is actually a pretty good name for it. Dr. Stanley Monteith, he gave his last lecture. I was up there. In fact, we were both up there. And I had my little camera, and he had all of his fancy web equipment. But I made a 2 DVD setup, and what basically 2 DVD package with his material. It was excellent. But he goes through the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, the Bilderberg Group, the secular humanism, tax-exempt foundations, the bankers, Lucis Trust, Theosophy, socialism, communism, the Jews, Jesuits, the New Age, Skull and Bones, the Rosicrucians, the Masons, and the Order of the Quest. Each one of these groups has the motivation to have a one-world government. They're all designed around the same philosophy, basically, as far as... And the Round Table was started, actually, as the original organization to implement all this stuff. And it had on one side the Council on Foreign Relations, the United Nations, the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission. All these groups were focused on this very thing. And so all the CFR members had one objective in mind. They want to bring about a surrender of the sovereignty of the national independence of the United States. Prominent bankers, industrialists, politicians, media owners, and almost everyone of any importance in the United States belongs to CFR. Since 1953, every chairman of the Federal Reserve and every chairman of the Disarmament Agency have been members. All have but one American Secretary of State. All but one Deputy Secretary of State, and all but one Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. In addition, 6 of our last 9 presidents have been CFR members, and their objective, according to Senator Barry Goldwater, is to basically to take away, eliminate national boundaries, suppression of racial and ethnic loyalties as a means to world peace. So the use of the Federal Reserve System by the deep state, originally a book by Carol Quigley called Tragedy and Hope outlined exactly what was happening. And he found out that this really happened way back when John Ruskin actually gave a lecture at Oxford, and one of the people in that listening to that lecture was Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes had acquired, his country was Rhodesia, but the diamond mines, the gold mines in South Africa. He was one of the richest men in the world, but he knew that this one world government system would not be able to be realized during his lifetime. So he set up 6 different parts of his will to go towards this. And once the powers of financial capitalism had a far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. Whoever owns the money owns the country. It doesn't matter who's running the country. That's one of the reasons why President Trump was such a threat to them, because he didn't need their money. He was independent and he couldn't be bribed. Well, Quigley wrote about this secret network operating both in the U.S. and Europe to control the world. And this Georgetown professor added that their work would be carried out by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings like the Bilderberg meetings, Trilateral Commission meetings, numerous invitation-only press-barred assemblies where powerful leaders and nations meet behind closed doors to steer mankind into the New World Order. The system was to be controlled in a feudalistic fashion by central banks and the world acting in concert by secret meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was to be the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks. And of course, here's the 3 people. And Alfred Milner, Cecil Rhodes, and Quigley traces all of this back to a conference and John Ruskin at Oxford in 1870. And so Cecil Rhodes and Alfred Milner had in mind was a formation of a master-slave society based on the principles of eugenics as derived from Plato's Republics. Malthusian eugenics is the philosophy of depopulation through the reduction of inferior races, human weeds, and the selective breeding of a race of thoroughbreds as described early in the century by Rockefeller-funded Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger. When Thomas Malthus's theory of population was later coupled with Darwin's evolutionary model, the result was social Darwinism. There's a book, most of you probably read this book, A Creature from Jekyll Island, by G. Edward Griffin. Excellent book showing what happened when these men gathered together on Jekyll Island. The Federal Reserve Act was a brainchild of Alfred Rothschild, Baron Alfred Rothschild of London. The final version of the act was decided in the secret meeting. It lasted 2 weeks in Jekyll Island, where they planned the Federal Reserve System. And that Federal Reserve Act was actually, that was in 1910. 3 years later, in 1913, they brought about this was actually passed, and it was the killing of the U.S. Constitution, a determining act of the international financiers in consolidating financial power in the United States. So now what they could do, they would encourage wars because we would have to actually borrow money from them, pay back interest, and so they get richer and richer. The more we spend, the richer they get. So that Federal Reserve thing was really a hoax. And it just so happened that Ian Fleming was he was a contemporary with Alfred Milner and others of the elitist group of globalists and based the James Bond series on the plots to take over the world by these people. Klaus Schwab reminds me of the guy with the cat, Mr. Evil. Anyway, so then also there was a guy named Anthony Sutton. He wrote several books. He showed exactly what was happening in Washington, where he was a Stanford historian. He exposed the Wall Street role in establishing communist state of Russia, financing communism, profiting from communism, ensuring that revolutionary Leon Trotsky would be there, and he gave him $20 million in gold to take over to Russia to support the communist cause. And why would they do that? Because the Federal Reserve System, they needed a viable threat to the United States. So we actually sent our ball bearings over there. They could shoot a missile, but they couldn't hit anything until we gave them the technology so that they could do that. So once they'd established Russia as a viable threat and China as a viable threat, now we have to borrow money to keep up so we can actually defend ourselves from these threats. And of course, they get richer and richer in the process. The central banks, the Federal Reserve, is a cartel of privately owned banks, decides interest rates, fate of the economy. During economic crisis, the federal bailout potential cost was $23.7 trillion, more than $75,000 per person in the United States. They bail out friends, cronies, their own banks. And so this is what's happening. What was actually worth $1 in 1910 is now worth less than $1 today. So they just print money, and the value is, it's basically a form of tax. Now this is where I think it gets really into what Maui is talking, the fires are all about. Michael Kaufman, this is 20 years ago, I was at a conference, and he downloaded all the stuff on smart growth onto my laptop. Just a wonderful guy. He passed away a few years ago. But he actually put together this map. He told me this. He spent 2 years putting this map together, and he couldn't understand why he was working on it. It was actually, it showed the corridor system of the Biodiversity Act, and it shows that the places where humans are allowed to live and the other spots where humans are not allowed to live, and you can see that. And he actually had this, blew it up and had it held up before Congress, and it never came up for a vote, because once they saw what they were planning on doing, then all of a sudden he was able to stop it. For decades, urban planners have adhered to the mantra that urban sprawl increases pollution, housing costs, more driving time to work and shopping, stress, and escalating consumption of scarce farmland and open space. Urban planning to implement what Al Gore calls smart growth supposedly corrects these problems and creates more livable, inexpensive homes for all. Irrefutable evidence, however, shows that the urban planning creates the very nightmares it's supposed to eliminate. In the process, it strips urbanites of the one most fundamental civil liberty, property rights. Land use control has been the goal of socialists for many decades. Lawrence Rockefeller, 1972, publication of The Use of Land, A Citizen's Policy Guide to Urban Growth, was instrumental in attempting to enact a land use regulation in Congress several times in the early 1970s. Edited by William Riley, who later served as EPA administrator under the George Bush Sr., the report claimed that planning the wise use of land is the best tool to guide growth toward achieving economic equality and protecting environment equality. But this basically does exactly the opposite. Following the failed attempt to employ anti-property rights failures of the use of land, the United Nations set up the same agenda in 1976 Conference on Human Rights, Habitat 1, held in Vancouver, for instance. The preamble of the agenda, item 10 of the conference, reports that the position of decent dwellings and healthy conditions for people can only be achieved if land is used in the interest of society as a whole. So basically, the government wants to take over the rights, and such policies do not permit Americans the freedom to live where they want to, where they choose. They must live inside the urban growth boundaries. Developers must provide open space around new development. Americans may not live in greenbelt areas around urban centers. They may not live in the designated view sheds of scenic highways or in buffer zone of a heritage river or a designated stream. Those advocating smart growth can become so obsessive they become irrational. For instance, on June 18, 2001, the Sierra Club defined efficient urban density as a city containing 500 housing units per acre. Put it another way, 500 families would have to live on an acre of land, which is 209 by 209 feet. This would require a 14-story apartment building if 36 very small 1,000 square foot units with hallways occupied each floor. Increasing the apartment to 1,500 square feet would require a 21-story building. So this calls for, and for this is an interesting thing. This was after Michael Kaufman showed this map to the chairman. He said, after I spoke to the committee in Eli meeting, I saw no reason for me to intrude any further on the committee's time. However, another matter has caught my attention. This matter is the Biodiversity Treaty and the Wildlands Project. Attached are the map and an explanation of the treaty by Michael Kaufman. His explanation is far better than anything I could say. I have only this comment. It seems that the sole purpose of the land grab of 1/2 of the land area of the lower 48 states is to provide space for large carnivores, wolves, grizzly bears, wolverines, and to allow cross-country skiing, hiking, primitive camping, etc. Surely the grizzlies will provide a great deal of enjoyment to the campers. The land grab would occur under a treaty which would be the supreme law of the land, according to the Constitution. Granted in the treaty are the benefits offered to hikers, hunters, seekers of solitude, all which exist under the conditions of laws which now prevail. None of the above activities are productive in terms of goods and services to the society in which we live. Efforts of productive individuals would very strictly be controlled by some agency in the United Nations. The benefits provided to society by presence of large carnivores escapes me, unless the campers and hikers plan to make pets out of them. Mr. Chairman, I most urgently ask that this committee consider the attached map, and that's the map, this one here, because it shows that there's corridors. In other words, the wolf needs so much land, but he has to be able to travel from one place to another, so that corridor cannot be occupied with humans. So that basically the entire United States is given over to the animals. And the thing is, the United States is only 5% developed. The paranoia about the need to control growth is a constant drumbeat of those promoting urban planning. They claim America is rapidly losing its farmland and open space, yet the U.S. Census Bureau of Census clarifies that less than 5% of the U.S. is being developed and less than 2.5% is as urban, using the 2002 corrected data. Even in densely populated East, both New York and Pennsylvania are only 10% developed. New Jersey, the most developed state, has only 30% of the land developed. To top it off, less than 1/4 of the loss in farmland since 1945 is due to urbanization, and the rate of loss has been dropping since the 1960s. The presumption that low-density residential development means more pollution, more congestion, fewer preserved natural resources is equally false. Likewise, the belief that higher density compact development mitigates those impacts is false. Increasing population density does little to alleviate auto-caused smog. Urban and suburban areas with the lowest population densities have the fewest air pollution problems. Population density for compactness also has little relationship to how much commuters depend on automobiles. More than 75% of commuter trips are by car, even in urban areas. Thus, any planning strategy that attempts to increase population density usually leads to more traffic congestion and stalled traffic. This exacerbates air pollution levels and potentially causes more areas to fail federal clean air goals. This in turn requires regulations that are even more restrictive. Portland, Oregon, the model for urban planning, has the most stringent land use plans in the U.S. since the 1970s. Implementing its plan, Portland has stopped building highways and instead built 2 light commuter rails that failed to achieve their goals. The fact that the same is true for alternative transit methods. In San Francisco's proposed 3rd Street light rail, for instance, will cost $40.50 per ride, which is equal to $18,225 annually per new commuter. For the same money, each new commuter could lease a new Pontiac Grand Am throughout the life of the rail system and pay for more than 100,000 miles of air travel at an average ticket rate each year. Alternatively, one could lease a Grand Am, use the remainder of annual subsidy for the average mortgage payment in the nation's most expensive housing market. Urban planning has also failed miserably in providing affordable housing. As a rule, more dense areas cost more to build, tend to have higher taxes, higher levels of pollution, higher cost of living, and the land use zoning can also have a devastating impact on the cost of land. A March 2002 study published by the Harvard Institute of Economic Research showed that zoning dramatically increases the cost of land in urban areas where regulatory zoning is not artificially driving up the price of land. The cost of an extra quarter acre in a single lot is very similar to a separate and independent buildable acre lot. However, in areas like these, Harvard study, only a small percentage of the value of the lot comes from the intrinsically high land price. The rest is due to the restrictions on construction. Land use restrictions were the only variable correlated with the huge cost increases. People can't afford to live in the cities anymore because of this. Land use control has been the goal of socialists for decades. No matter how it is cut, urban planning and smart growth is bald-faced fraud that is creating a nightmare for people across America. Following the failed attempt to employ the anti-poverty rights features of the use of land, the United Nations set the same agenda in 1976 Conference on Human Settlements, Habitat 1, for decades. So, land rights use and land use control has been the goal of socialists for decades.